Nhớ rằng của ya Sheriva là ya ít tu nhiệt chế mong nhớ cho Hmong Minnesota.
My name is Maina. I am a mother to 4 beautiful children.
My name is Peely Lee. I am married to my partner Joa, and we have 2 daughters and 2 sons.
Nhớ rằng cho lên từ Columbia nó chỉ hùa Plo Khang của nhớ hùa Minnesota của ya iling na ya.
I treat mental health as kind of an outlet of when I need to express my feelings and talk to someone. I try to engage in a conversation and talk about how I feel and with my feelings, and that helps express my emotions, and that helps me relieve of any stress or any mental health issues that I have.
Nhớ rằng của ya Sheriva là ya ít tu nhiệt chế mong nhớ cho Hmong Minnesota. Của ya tu tham một thia. Nếu nó sản đồng hay tiệt của sản để trả cho lo lù mi cả hùa mental health này nhở. Chỉ cho bé mong mà lo lù nó ya ít lo lù và nữ thái độ hay tiệt. Yêu cho cái xã, nữ bùa rong nữ lo yêu bố một cái nhiều chuyện cho cái xã. Đầu tiên tu mong mà là xã hay tiệt tôi ya cái nhiều chuyện này nhở. Nếu của tu không mà của xã tiệt mental health mà nữ thái độ hay tiệt sẽ yêu tu không yêu xã yêu bố một cái nhiều chuyện thì nữ bố một tấm bằng yêu cho cái xã nữ bố mỏ cho yêu thì tiếp thu năng là chỉ mua nhiều chuyện ra chỉ là là cụ chỉ chơi ra chỉ vậy là chỉ là họ mental health nhưng trong chỉ mua ra chỉ thì chỉ cho tiếp thu năng là chỉ là cho cái xã ở đó là nhiều chuyện là nó chỉ tò mò ở chỉ tao họ là sợ chỉ tao là sao nên chị họ nói mà giờ ít họ thầu yêu để yêu mua tấm bằng cho yêu họ mental health nên chị nữ chỉ sĩ đi nó cho tôn tín này. Để cụ tự khăng chị cụ xã hay tiệt lúc xí hậu và nhiều sẽ chấp lời thiệt khó sẽ chấp lời hậu cụ luôn đăng này giờ thầu cụ chỉ xỉa so cụ chỉ mà cụ chỉ xỉa trong áo phá cậu chị vấn đề cụ chỉ xỉa tới chị bé dân bao hay tiệt cụ chỉ dân mua ít họ mò phải cụ chỉ mò cancer cho luôn chữ nè chị lấy những hai đôi bé cho trắng hay tiệt cụ chỉ dân nhiều khó có từ mò chỉ muaยังอยู่ชิมัวแต่สิเลยมั่วชั่วได้จ่ายเจ็บป้าเจอหนึ่งนั่งก็หนึ่งจ่อเชียเดมินจิลีเอาไปลินทำไปย้อนจีซื้อเจ็บไปยังป้าให้แต่กูจียังอยู่ชิตนทำไปย้อนเดอยู่ถึงแต่มาอยู่ยังข้อเชียเทียอยู่ยังฉีเชียให้เดียวว่าจะอยู่ตื้อฉีอยู่ลุ้นนั่งตื้อฉีโตถึงแต่กูจังเกินแต่ฉีโตเดีย residency เนี่ยจะอยู่ตื้อฉีโตจากการรู้ตัวอยู่เนี่ยที่อยู่จีที่อยู่เสียนะจะอยู่ยังkhó sẽ khóอยู่ยังchỉ sẽ thếแต่是อยู่ยังรู้อยู่จีเท่าเดียวว่าจะหนูรู้นั่งหนูยังคือโตอยู่ใจนั่งหนูต้องจะโตหนูต้องจะโตปอดจะหนูขอเจนจีแล้วก็รอตรงหนูนะแต่是ถูกกูจีเสียตานะจีขณะจังอยู่เช่นบอกจะไปเท่าไปขอเช่นบอกเลยจ้าเราตัวยอกสิชอบเลยเนี่ยกูเนี่ยนะเจนเนอเป๊ะจะไม่หยอมาเป๊ะยังบอกให้เดียยอเป๊ะชิปเปอร์ป้าทั้งกากูเนี่ยเจกูเนี่ยยังยอมมอที่สิเวียเดียกูเนี่ยยังอินสิมัว depression รอนะเวียเดียเลยถอนยอที่จำรอเจถอว่าจ่อกูเนี่ยก็ยังเสียมีตัวมีหยอนั่นเต้าตัวเนี่ยยอกูเนี่ยเท่กูจะเงินเสียชีตัวมีหยอเดียนะเจยังบอกให้เดียกูเนี่ยยังจีเกจอนเนี่ยรอเท่เจกูจีเงินตัวชียงนั่นได้ทุกกูจีเสียนะกูเนี่ยให้ยกคาเชียนั่นเจไปลูกหอบเพี้ยนแต่ไปเจมันหยอมายังให้เดียก็ไปรอเช่ากูเนี่ยกับกูเนี่ยที่ลีว่าโตนั่งที่ลีโตหนูรู้จ้าเดียยอจุ่มกูจีมันนี่ยกคาเชียหังเจเธออ้อชงแล้วมาไปยังชุบกูเนี่ยย้อนใจกูเนี่ยเลยอ๋อเจตื่นลงตื่นบน vacation เนี่ยจ้าเรายังจ้ากูเนี่ยกับกูเนี่ยบนให้ไปเจไปวอลินตัวอินตัวกูเนี่ยที่เลยมาเลยก็มัวเชียtự trong mà lấy đặc á mua xe luôn thì chỉ bây giờ năng bây giờ sáng gặp của nhà bọn nó của nhà thì chỉ có qua thì chỉ cho của chị thơ ở trong đó nên lúc này nó của nhà nhưng chẳng nhưng do của chị bây giờ mình nhỏ là bây giờ chẳng do của chị thì是mua ngoài thì bây ba của nhà thì bây nó của nhà cho của nhà mẫu nó chỉ của nhà thổ nó khó xe đang mà nữa hơi rong ra lạiแต่ชีโนกูยังบอกให้แต่ได้ตึงนั่งนะเราจะเกี่ยวเชียเราคอมเมนต์healthนี่ชีย้ายบริษัทนี่ยังยั่วหังโจเลยยังมอช่างช่องบริษัทอีเจมอโซโจจะตีนั่งนะมากูยังสาให้แต่ chỉ do hai tia you chưa you được khăng sư này you ba đời you cho cái nhau share cho cái khó share nè đầu tiên tôi tính rằng mà lấy you chủ cho giải share ấy lấy you chủ mu cho lấy từ tham mồ lo lấy ít từ phong như ấy bia lấy cho cái khó share cho cái tu share ấy sẽ bấm mồ lửa cho hậu cái ba lửa nè you know 如果有用啥更高係啲個炒啥領導咯，個有路些，睇有路你用啥領導呢？就做啲都能啦嘛，主要係啲有啥，注意到看誒你應用上司，有做 not sure 要做 not sure，有做門診嘅 professional 誒嘅 therapist，然後有睇出有做見有些，有做啲都能有做當家我俾做好幾把有誒頭個有啲你大家啥用做有都看，睇差唔多做幾考試做幾有些的呢，so 很多人考過晒的，要被蒙讀讀，冇見有些你家了，我些。khi xưa cho trăm mua bị cái họ trăm mua này cái này chỉ ba yêu rong nè yêu chủ yếu sao cái yêu rong cái yêu lúc xưa nhỏ tuổi rồi cho cái khó xưa mà yêu chủ khi lúc xưa nó là lương thực thật từ cuối tôi khăng mà cô giải thì tới rồi bây giờ mong chuyên nghiệp mua cho tham mộ chuyên nghiệp mua thật thiết bị rồi cho kỹ như xe trâu lô tem long là của xã thì do biết họ ít họ mà của xã thì mong này ạ yêu bên này sẽ xã thì yêu chủ chứ yêu được không có khó xử nhưng yêu rong xử nè and trâu tết thu nâng nằm mà ni chỉ nhảy bộ lên tờ nè từ từ nâng nhưng do thì là lúc hậu lúc lú cho chemical nhưng chỉ giàu chỉ là yêu chủ cơ mà nó chua ba đầu là vì thế thì yêu ba đầu là do cái啥sự nè so ý do khăn tờ hay thì bên mong mà chỉ do hay thì yêu chú ý được khăn xứ này yêu rong nè khăn tờ nhưng ba đầu thế yêu thì chỉ nhảy bộ lên tờ tại vì bên cỡ thế bỏ lọt do cho tham mộ này nhở mà khó thi ó mà của xã thì bên tụ khăn là dân xã thì giả thế yêu chỉ sẽ được thế người thì ở nhà của tôi mua ít khó cái nhiều sẽ ở nhà của chỉ chưa của tôi khăn có khó sẽ nhưng nhiều rong xứ nè để chỉ nếu chỉ liên quan nếu chỉ nhảy bộ lên tờ sometimes thôi yêu mua cho cái nhiều sẽ cho cái xã lên tờ chỉ có thì yêu chỉ chưa tôi khăn xứ để chỉ đâu nhưng mà thì mua để cho các bạn có nói chuyện so với yêu lư yêu chủ muốn chỉ tham mộ là thế li bảo ba yêu hay tiệt yêu là yêu là lư chủ yếu yêu ba cái lý do so khi nào họ cũng sao cái bây giờ mong xã thiệt yêu một cái nhiều sự lý do cái yêu một chút yêu tham mộ ở chỗ này mình cũng bây cũng ra đan hưng để cũng tranh hưng chỗ này số từ mình thiệt thầu cơ nó cũng giá số thiệt hay là lũ chỗ này số lượng số từ hay tiệt giờ nếu mua cái nhiều xe cái chỉ xe nếu mua ấy giờ cái xã ở đó này nhiều xe là có nên cho khởi chỗ này từ khăn còn đấy giờ có ở chỉ ba yêu cái yêu rong nữa giờ yêu mua ấy cho cái nhiều xe lý do là thọ cái khi tôi năng cái lớp ba cái xã có cái xã đó thế sẽ là bộ một chỉ ba cái rồi giờ có tụ tham mộ có tụ phong dư có nhẹ có gì có cho viện giàu nữa mua tụ tư là thọ có khi tôi năng cái lớp ba nó có xã thế cái lớp ba cái thì đi nhớ rong.
My name is Maina. I am a mother to 4 beautiful children. I have 2 boys and 2 girls. I've been married to my husband for 24 years and reside in Wausau, Wisconsin. I am the second child to 9 kids. I'm the oldest daughter to the 5 girls that my parents have had and grew up in the Appleton area. So it's been a blessing to just have my big family be so supportive. I currently work at the Marshall Clinic, and I've been there for 18 years. So I love just patient care and being able to take care of patients and the needs that they have and be able to just do life with them as they come into, our building and seeking the help that they need as well. Mental health has been something that has affected me personally for as young as I was 12 years old, and it comes in so many different walks of life, and whether that is depression, whether that is dealing with family, with abuse or some sort of addiction, whether that is someone that has been abused by another person And so I happen to be a part of that story, and I am here today to share a little bit about what has happened to me. So at the age of 10 years old, I was sexually abused by a family member. And during that time, you know, you don't know what abuse is. You're not sure what's happening to you. You almost kind of doubt that something is wrong, and you kind of talk yourself into it that everything is okay and that this is a norm. And it wasn't until I was 12 years old that I realized that this is more than a normal thing, that this is abuse, that I am being tormented by a family member. And so I was very, very hurt, and I was very, very broken. And I became this person that held myself back from everything. And it was almost like a secret that I had to keep to myself because that was the right thing to do. And so I remember one day I went to school, and I was in middle school, and I went to my counselor, and it was my cry for help. And it was just literally saying, hey, this is what's going on with me. And in that moment, I wasn't sure what I was wanting. Was I asking for help? Was I asking her to call, 911? I don't know. I just sat there and I just poured out my heart. I never really took the time to say, I need professional help. I don't know if it was because I didn't know where to go, because it was my secret. And my secret meant that I wasn't able to tell anybody. And so it was out of fear. I had a lot of anxiety, and seeking professional help meant that I needed to spill my secret and tell my parents, but would they believe me? And so that professional support never, ever even crossed my mind that I could do that. And it wasn't until later on in my life that I realized, gosh, I needed that help. I needed to seek that professional help. And where could I have gone? Why didn't my counselor help me? And it was now just finding ways to make sense out of all of this. And so up until now, I've never sought professional help. I've always sought my community, which is my husband, which is my friends, allowing them to just hear my story and crying to them. And that was just a professional help to me that I felt that I saw. And I wish I knew a little bit more about the resources that were within my own local community. A few things of why I feel like it's so hard to share stories like mine, especially in the Hmong community, is feeling that shame, is bringing your family down, making your family member look bad, or them not believing me, or them just saying that, hey, just tell me, but we're not going to tell anybody. And so it's a secret on top of another secret. And I feel like we just don't have the resources or the education to really say it's okay to speak about these things. It's okay to share. You're still going to be okay. And I feel like for my family, it wasn't that they weren't able to support me, but it was more so that they weren't able to find the support that I needed, even when I shared. And so I just, you just feel closed. You just feel like, you know what, this is not going to go anywhere, so I'm just going to deal with it by myself. Therefore, we never really seek the help that we really need. And so I encourage us to be able to be open-minded and to be able to listen to someone who is going through something, and to listen to their stories, and to let them know that they're going to be okay, and to let them know that you're going to walk with them through their recovery, through their healing, and to believe them, because that is truly what has happened to them. And so, yeah, thank you for listening to my story today. Thank you for being the audience, a safe place for me. It's taken me a whole lot just to be able to be bold and be courageous, to be here today, to be able to say, I am a victim of sexual abuse.
So my name is Peely Lee. I am married to my partner Jua, and we have 2 daughters and 2 sons. Originally born and raised in La Crosse, Wisconsin. And just a little bit about me. In La Crosse, I did a lot of things like the county board. I was an elected official and the county board and also the school board. I love to fish. I love to hunt. I have a farm in Wisconsin where I spent a lot of time with my farm animals and did a lot of hunting and fishing there as well too. And outside of that, also, I am one of the co-founders and owners of a Diverse Search and Associates. And so what we do is we do HR consulting and recruiting for large companies and small companies and nonprofits. And yeah, that's just a little bit about me. In my own terms, I think mental health is really the psychological, emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being of a person that can be impacted by the very same things: spiritual, psychological, physical, and emotional things, right? So it's an understanding of your well-being that can also be impacted by the exact same things. And what I want to cover today is I want to cover mental health in regards to shamanism, mental health in regards to domestic violence and murder suicides, and then also mental health in regards to Hmong historical trauma. As I mentioned earlier, I want to talk about 3 different things in the mental health area. I want to talk about shamanism, and then also the murder suicide, and then also the historical trauma. And so I'll start with historical trauma. And this term is not widely used or known yet, but essentially what historical trauma is, for example, the pains and sufferings and the trauma that our parents felt through war. It is essentially passed down genetically to us, while they're suffering and going through what they're going through. That is also passed down to us, even though it's in the past. We still hold those traumas, even though we weren't there, right? And so historical trauma is something that's passed down from generations to generations, even though you didn't live in that generation of time. And so that is something that has had a huge impact in our community that doesn't have a lot of studies done yet. And so yeah, so that's kind of a part of it. And then the second thing is the murder suicide in our community. I know that that's been a huge thing within the past, just the past 20, 30 years. And it hasn't really been well studied yet. But the murder suicide in our community, in comparison to other Asian or ethnic minorities, we do lead in all aspects of that. And I think that through a lot of research and a lot of people talking about it, it's come down to mental health. And it is something where once an event happens, like in Wisconsin or Minnesota or California, it seems like there's a string of events that happens right after that, right? Where you could have 4 to 5 murder suicides in our communities within 1 or 2 year span. And a lot of times, in regards to mental health, right? It's seen as, like this person did that, and then their reaction was just to harm them, right? But a lot of times these act of wanting to harm someone or take someone's life and then your own, it comes from mental health. And so, for example, whether it is, growing up and having high expectations where women should feel this way and men should feel this way, and because we're born as a Hmong man, we have to act a certain way, we have to be a certain way, we have to live to a certain expectations. And when you don't get your way, it seems like there's a trigger response, and we feel the need that we have to do something about it, right? To where it comes to the point where if someone has the feeling that they have the right to end someone's life and then their own, and then just leave their kids, that is something that is not well studied, but it's something that is a huge talking point in our community. And I think that that's something that we should really focus on. And there's really great nonprofits out there that are doing the groundwork, that are doing the preventative stuff in our communities, right? So we have like the Building Our Futures. They're in Wisconsin. I know we have Kieshia Inc. in Wisconsin as well too. We have the Freedom Inc. That all these nonprofits are already doing the work to try to prevent these things, right? And to bring more awareness to it. And I think that a lot of it comes down to where can we get our community to make sure that these things don't happen anymore, right? And it always kind of boils down to the mental health, right? Like what happened to this person to make them feel that they had that right to take that initial action or wanting to harm someone's life and their own, right? And so yeah, that's one thing. That's the second thing I want to talk about. And the third thing was the shaman community, right? And so from my personal own experience, I am a shaman by religion, and I'm also a shaman by day, I guess you can say. And I wanted to talk about this because I was told, and I also experienced that back then, it seems like a lot of Hmong shamans, they came to being in their shamanism from, physical pain or from just not feeling right. And now with this newer generation, within the past 5 or 10 years, we have what we call like a newer generation of shamans, right? Where when one person's selected, they typically comes in forms of maybe anxiety, mental health. And so with my own personal experience, I guess as a young kid, right, like I always knew that something was different about me, right? Where like you can, feel certain things, certain things, and I was just a little bit different. Where sometimes I knew things were going to happen before they happened already. You would have visions, and you can see and hear things differently. But I guess kind of growing up, like we never really talked about it, right? And I never knew much about it, and I thought it was normal. And then I think it was not until I graduated college, and it seems like my senses were higher, right? Where I could really understand people, I could really feel like their emotions, I can hear and see and feel different things, and that got to a point where I'm like, like why am I different in these ways, right? But still, I never addressed it. And then it wasn't until we had our first child, my partner and I had our first child, that I finally felt this overbearing need to do something. I just didn't know what it was, but it was impacting me like mentally, where, I don't really tell the story, but where basically like I could like really, really sense and feel and see a lot of things that, people don't normally feel and see, right? And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, I'm pretty sure my mind is on the right track. I'm pretty sure like I'm able to like keep myself in check to where I know what I want and I know what I'm doing, but I just couldn't control what I was seeing and hearing and feeling. And so at this point, I got to the point where I was like, should I seek medical help? Should I seek, like a mental health practitioner, maybe talk to someone about it? And, I just wasn't sure. And also in our community, right, it's very kind of like looked down upon if you seek like mental help, And so I just wasn't really sure what to do until I had a friend. She was like, hey, I think you're going through what my parents kind of went through, and I think that you should talk to my parents. And so I spoke to her parents, and they're also shamans. And, like it was the strangest thing ever, where I had this like really heavy burden and this really heavy weight on my shoulders. And I just remember like parking at their front doors and then like opening that door and then walking into their house, and everything, like I felt like all the pain and like suffering and weight and everything I've ever had just completely dropped. And I was like, oh my gosh, like what just happened? And then that's when I was told, hey, you probably have, I guess what we call it is, in Hmong we call it Huaneng, and in Mika, or in English, I guess we'll call it spirit guides, right? And they say, hey, just so you know, you have spirit guides, Huaneng. And it's because you come from a lineage of shamans, and you're the next up to kind of take that responsibility. And I wasn't really sure what to think, because I didn't really grow up, like I grew up as a shaman, but I didn't really grow up like really heavily invested in my community, where like we're constantly like waneng hupli like all the time, right? So I wasn't really sure how to feel. But then after that, I mean, everything just like it made a 360 and I understood everything. And then from that on, I did like a lot of lessons. I spoke with my seafood and I spoke with my just people around me, and you know, like I finally understood everything, right? And everything that I've seen and felt and I've had visions on, it finally made sense, you know. But it wasn't until I spoke to someone, right? And that is the number one thing in mental health in our community, is finding the will and finding the way to speak to someone. And that is probably the hardest thing, is that speaking to someone. And so yeah, that's my experience. And you know, I'm really glad I did that, because I'm in a really good place now and I have a really good understanding of who I am. And yeah, in our community here, there is a huge stigma with mental health, right? And in my own personal beliefs, I feel that there's a stigma because we come from somewhat of a indigenous clan system, where if something is wrong about you and something is not right about you, then it seems like it sticks with you throughout your entire life, right? Where let's say if one day you want to get married, right? They'll be like, oh, well, that person, you know, like they have like mental health issues. And like, I don't want to say it this way, but people use the term "duneng sialu," right? Where duneng the anu sialu na, and so that sticks with you, right? And so in our community, we never want to be different, right? And the reason being is because we're afraid of the negative connotations that comes with us throughout these journeys, right? And so a lot of times people who are struggling through mental health, or maybe they have like a mental disability or physical disability, they're always kind of hidden in our community, right? Whether it's purposely by them or by the people around them. And so the stigma to seek help and the stigma to have mental health, it's always very hidden. And I think that it's very problematic to have it be something that is always kind of hidden from our community. And that is the reason why we don't really talk about it, right? And so, yeah, thank you. And then also, I just want to take this time to also thank you all for listening, and just understand that, you know, all the things that I've talked about, whether that was through domestic violence and murder suicides, or historical trauma, or even on shamanism, right? That's just a very small sample size of the larger issues that we have in our community with mental health. That's just 3 really small things, and there's still many, many things that need to be discussed. But the most important thing that I can leave with you is just know, right, that in the times of your worst feelings and your worst thoughts and maybe suicidal ideations, that just know that there's someone there that's willing to listen. And I think that being able to get yourself there, to have someone listen to you, is probably one of the hardest things, right? Because you don't want to share your pains, and you don't want to share these ideas that you have with people, because in our community, we're just so kept and so hidden, right? And I think that finding someone that you really trust and you really care about to have these conversations with would really, really help in your future if you're going through mental health. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Nuva, and I am a mom of 3 girls. And I've been married now for over 10 years. And so I wanted to share my story about dealing with postpartum depression and then just anxiety. So I think for anxiety, I don't have like a formal diagnosis, but I think I've always been very anxious person, you know, always that person that like likes to have all the details and needs to plan ahead and gets really worried if something happens that's not supposed to happen. So I think things like that just throughout my life. And so I think when I had actually my second child, you know, I was just dealing with a lot of issues, especially, you know, your postpartum. And I guess for me, I don't know why the second was the hardest, but I think it was because maybe I thought like, oh, okay, my first one was really easy, you know, really easygoing baby. I didn't really know what to expect. And so for me, I think it just didn't have it didn't cause a lot of issues for me. But with my second, it's like, well, this is my second child. I kind of know what to expect. And I was also, I think, very rigid in my thinking. You I think with mental health, it's really important that you be really flexible and open to changes. And so for me, having my my second, I was really wanting to breastfeed, and there were things that were going on that were complicating it. Like first, my baby had jaundice, and then had to have that light therapy for a few weeks. And then, we had issues with just like nursing, and I was like really, really wanting to try nursing and didn't want to do formula. And so for the first like 2 months or so, it was really brutal. I mean, even after the first month when I went for my, 6-week checkup with my doctor, I didn't even realize like, there's baby blues that people kind of think. I thought it was just the baby blues, but, I think the nurse just asked me like, how are you doing? And I just broke down crying. And then it was like, yeah, it seems like you maybe need professional help. And so, having that kind of reality check, like, okay, this isn't the baby blues, like it's something maybe a little bit more serious. I did try to get see therapy. I went to a therapist, I think maybe 2 times, but I stopped because it was just really hard to find somebody that I felt that could relate to me being a Hmong mom, right? Because there are a lot of things that come with being a Hmong mom. Just the expectations, things that you've grown up with. So I stopped going, I think, like I said, 2 months after. But I think what really helped was just trying to realize it's a temporary time, and just, you just have to keep going because you still have kids to take care of, and life goes on. So I don't know exactly how I got through it, but I think having support system is really helpful. Like my husband was really great. And, just taking time for myself. And then of course it helped because once, breastfeeding got better, that was a lot easier. But then then it comes back to, okay, then now you go back to work and trying to deal with a 4-month baby and a 3-year-old and going back to work. But yeah, I mean, I think this is really important for mental health, just to realize you have to really take care of yourself and ask for help, and find a support system that, you can talk to as well. So even though I stopped going to therapy, I would talk to people about it that I had friends and stuff that went through the same thing, or our moms too that can kind of relate as well. And so that helped. Yeah, and then just trying to find things that I enjoy doing. I really enjoy playing volleyball, going outdoors, reading. So for me, mental health is just, your well-being, how you kind of cope with life events and changes and transitions, things that happen, and how well you deal with it. So, you can have good mental health or bad mental health, and there's a lot of things that, kind of can affect your mental health, right? So depending on maybe where you live, if you have a job, your family and friends, culture for us, I think Hmong culture plays a big part of it because of all the expectations that come from it as well. So yeah, so that is what mental health means to me. And I think it's so important that everybody really tries to be mindful of their mental health, because it's things that you don't think about sometimes. So then when it comes up, it might be I don't know, a big thing, or almost a crisis, right? So I think being aware of it and kind of checking in with yourself, doing things each day to kind of make sure that you're trying to be the best you, and that you can go through life, and persevere and deal with the challenges. As we know, there's going to be things that come up, and it's okay that sometimes things really knock you down and you feel really down, but then to be able to kind of come back from that, I think shows really good mental health. And yeah, I think it's really challenging. I think, even though if you're Hmong and if you're not, to find to seek mental health, professional help, right? I think especially with being Hmong, though, there's an added layer, right? Just because I don't think a lot of people, especially the older generation, really understand what that means. And it's well, we were able to do all this, you should be able to do it. And it's no, it's different, you think back then, it was kind of they just had to do it in survival, but here we have a little bit more freedom, right? So there are things that, are just different that sometimes it's harder for the older generation to grasp. And so I think mental health is one of those. I think personally, just in my personal family experience, right, there are people that I know that really should seek out mental health professionals, right, that need to really talk about some of the trauma that they've dealt with, but they're like, oh no, I'm good, I'll figure it out, I'll deal with it. And it's like, well, you're not really good, but okay, but you can't really force anybody. So I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't know if there's like stigma or maybe just lack of knowledge, you know. And also it's really hard to find, I think. Oh, I don't know, it's really hard, but it's like when I had to look for a therapist, you know, and I was like, you know, newly postpartum, it's like, oh my gosh, it's so much work. I have to make sure that like it's okay with my insurance, you know, it's in network, the cost, you know, if it, because you know, you still have to pay like a copay, location, and then hours too, right? Because sometimes depending on the place that you go, sometimes they only have like hours during working hours, right? So for me, I mean, that wasn't a problem because I was, you know, at home with my baby. But like for others that maybe are working and stuff, you know, that could make a difference. And then also to realize that like, I think it's hard to get mental health because not a lot of people talk about it. And maybe that is where that stigma comes, right? Because when people hear like mental illness, right, they're like, oh, okay, you kind of like are a little aware of that person. Like, wait, what is that, right? But I mean, like mental illness is a lot of different things. And it's like, you know, a lot of people deal with that every day. So yeah, I think there is a stigma with just talking about it because you don't want to get labeled that, right? Like that girl that is bipolar or, you know, anxious. But yeah, and then I think with being Hmong too, there's the added layer of language for some, right? Especially like the older generation. Like for me and others maybe younger than me, it's like English is probably our preferred language, so it's okay for us. But for others, you know, they feel more comfortable in Hmong, and sometimes the language is hard, and some of the words that we don't really have because our language is really like beautiful, but it's sometimes very more descriptive. There's not like one word for like mental health, right? You have to really try to kind of explain it. So yeah, there are a lot of like challenges, I'd say, and yeah, stigma is one of them. I'd also say, like I said, lack of knowledge and just like not knowing where to start and not hearing about it, so you don't even know that it exists. My biggest advice is just to try to reach out, you know, to somebody. You know, it's so important to have a support system, whether that be a family or friend. And, you know, reaching out to like the right people too, because sometimes, you know, your family and friends, they mean the best, but sometimes that person is not the right person because they may just kind of be like, oh, you'll do better, you'll be fine, you know, and maybe kind of dismiss your feelings. But if you can find somebody that you can talk to that, you know, kind of is more, I don't know, just like really is a good listener that can validate and kind of maybe like, oh, you know what, I don't know much about this, but, you know, maybe I can refer you to so-and-so. You know, you can all, I know like for us, like I don't see the doctor very often, but, you know, going to see a physical and then talking to a doctor about that too. But I think there's a lot of resources online too, you know. There's also these crisis text lines and phone numbers. I think now there's 988, you know. So if you don't ever feel like you're in a mental health crisis or just like dealing with a lot of stress and you're not sure what to do, like there's that number. But there's a lot of online resources now. And I think also in our community, there's a lot more talk about this, so that's really great, you know. And I've seen some Facebook groups about this too as well. So I'd say you just, you know, reach out in whatever way you can, and maybe if you don't know where to first, just, you know, check online, call 988, but really just like do something instead of just hoping it go away, because it may not, and then you don't want that to kind of turn into something bigger and more. So like for example, for me, you know, I think it was just maybe a few years, 3 years ago, I want to say, where I really started therapy, because I just realized, like, even though my kids were older, they were like, I don't know, what, 5 and 8. I just didn't like the way I was as a mom, because I was always yelling. I was always stressed and like very just annoyed and impatient with them. And I'm just like, I don't like the way I am. And I grew up with a mom who was like that too. And so I was like, okay, I need to seek help, you know. And for me, I guess it was different because, you know, I was, you know, I'm a college graduate and stuff. And so I was also going to get my master's in social work. So I was like, okay, I really need to work on myself, you know, especially if I'm like going into this field as well. And so I just kind of reached out on Facebook. I think there was a list of like, oh, these are a list of like Hmong therapists. And, you know, you don't have to look for a Hmong therapist if you're Hmong, but for me, that was just something important, because for me, I feel like that was a big part of like what impacted my life and how I live my life and how and just the things that come up. And so I just wanted somebody that kind of understood the culture. But and so I went to see a Hmong therapist from the list that I got online, and I just like looked through and called. Actually, I think I saw that list, but then I also reached out to an old friend who I knew kind of worked in the field to ask for referrals. So I think that's actually how I found my therapist. So I think, yeah, and that was really helpful. And I think the main thing to also remember is that for therapy work, it's going to take time because, it's like 30 plus years you're just been dealing with on your own. And then when you finally go seek therapy or help, you can't just expect like immediate change. It's going to take time and years. But it was really great for me. And I found that really helpful. And I also did EMDR too, which is the type of therapy for those that want to deal with trauma. So I think that's been really helpful as well. I've stopped going since now, I think for a year or so. But, I think, yeah, I would like go back to therapy if I ever felt like, just being overwhelmed with life and just wanting just a space to kind of talk through it and self-reflect and, to have that like neutral person that, will give you good perspective and help you. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it helped you just to realize that, it's common and normal if you're going through things and it's okay to seek help. And I think, like I tell people, therapy can be for everybody. Just because you're seeing a therapist doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. And so I hope that you look into your mental health if that's something that you're interested in, and make sure you seek help.
Hello, my name is Kang Lee. I'm a food scientist. I love pizza, and I think pineapple belongs in pizza. And my perspective on mental health is I treat mental health as kind of an outlet of when I need to express my feelings and talk to someone. I try to engage in the conversation and talk about how I feel and with my feelings, and that helps express my emotions, and that helps me relieve of any stress or any mental health issues that I have. The way how I view mental health is usually there's a father figure and then there's a son. And for example, me and my dad, we don't talk to each other. We'll be in the kitchen and then we'll walk right by each other, and then we won't say a single word to each other. And I think that represents something that we see very often within the father and son dynamic within our Hmong community. We don't really talk about our personal feelings with each other, or if we feel like we're in pain, that's not an action that we show. And I haven't seen this example from my dad, right? Like, he doesn't show emotions to me, but just looking from the past, like from my dad and my grandpa, they don't really speak about their emotions to each other. So I think that's a missing component that will help guide our younger generation's son that is missing within the Hmong community, and that needs to be stepped up on. The way how I see mental health is kind of like talking it through with people. For example, in my inner circle, within my intermediate family, I've seen my grandpa and my dad, they don't really speak with their emotions, right? I've never seen an example where my dad expresses how he feels to his dad, or how my grandpa speaks how he feels to his son. And I've never seen them like cry to each other or show weakness, or I've never seen a time where my dad had to ask my grandpa for advice. And I think that as a son, when I look at that example, it's difficult for me to go and approach my dad and talk about that topic where, usually your father figure, you can go up and ask your dad questions or personal questions. That's something I don't feel comfortable with, and I haven't seen many examples and saw that in our community here, especially in the Hmong community with our mental health. So my example about mental health is when my friend came up to me and asked me about his career advice. His parents' background, they don't work in a corporate world, so they don't know what that's like, and he felt like he didn't have anyone to go to, so he came to talk to me about what career changes he wanted to make. And in that instance, I saw a reflection of myself where, I also have trouble talking to my dad about this, right? That's not something I've ever seen my dad talk to, or talk to his dad about. So as myself, I saw a reflection, and in this instance, my friend was really stressed. I saw the buildup of him, trying to figure out what he should do next in his career, and I saw that put a lot of anxiety on him, and he was having trouble just navigating through that road. So I kind of talked him through it and validated his emotions, right? Understand what's going on and understand how he can help problem solve through this, and also give him the flip side of like how his dad probably never went through this, right? Like, that's a tough scenario when you have a father figure who's supposed to kind of give you guidance, but his dad's never navigated this road path before, right? His dad doesn't work in the corporate world, and his dad can't give him that advice. So when you have a father figure and you can't go up to ask a question about, that's a really tough and difficult situation to go through, and especially in our Hmong community where it's evolving, it's changing. People are going through different career paths, and people are trying to do better for themselves. And when we get stuck at a rock and we're trying to go where the people where we're supposed to go ask advice don't know, or who hasn't experienced that's a whole new experience for us, right? So I think that's key in our community, where we can have people, father figures, to friends or mentors we can look up to and kind of help us guide through this new path that we've never been on. And I think it's important for us to express our emotions, understand that what you are feeling is true, and you're not the only one that's feeling this. A lot of people in our community is feeling this, and there's people out there that are willing to talk with you and work this out with you because they've been there before. My perspective or my take about why Hmong people in the Hmong community don't get help about mental health, it's not something we talked about, right? It's a personal thing that we don't see, and it's non-confrontational. Like in our Hmong community, we don't really look people in the eye when we talk, right? When we're talking, we're looking to the side of someone. We're not making eye contact. And in these scenarios where it's personal, and you want to talk about something, sometimes you feel shunned upon, right? Sometimes when you express your emotions to close families, they may joke about it, they might not take it seriously, and then you feel affected by that, right? That's something very personal that you're trying to express, and you're trying to go to close people, right? These are your family members that you're trying to go to and expressing how you feel. And sometimes when they shrug you off or they laugh at it, you kind of shut down, or you kind of shut yourself and close yourself off to other people. So I feel like when this has happened more than once or a couple of times, you feel that you've been neglected and you haven't been communicated with. So as we see these examples come up, or the more we see of this, I think we should put a pause on it and take a break and really understand what's happening in here, right? And then you should really start to go look and find people that are more, you should start to go and find people who has been through this, right? There's people that are going through this. There's people that has talked about this. And in order to break down these walls in our community to go through mental health, right, we have to start by opening the discussion. I want to thank you guys for listening to my story and listening to my perspective about mental health. In order for us to break down these barriers, we have to have people like you willing to listen, willing to understand our pain and the struggle that we go through. And everyone's mental health is different. But the more we openly talk about it, the more we're comfortable with it, and the more we can break down these barriers.
Hello, my name is Alina Yang, and I am 21. I am from Merced, California, and I'm currently in London studying Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing. And I am sharing experience about a mental health situation that I am currently and also have dealt with. And this is going to be my goal in raising awareness to generational trauma, as well as the generational differences between our parents, and the grandparents, and how it affects me, my family, specifically me and my parents. But yeah, let's get into it. So I always felt like growing up, I always had a difference of ideas within, my family, and I always felt like we never really agreed with each other, or like there would be like, situations like, for example, career paths, right? For example, like my parents would want me to go into nursing, med school or lawyer or, something that is like high paying and very, very intelligent. But then for me, like I've always been interested in the arts. I've always been interested in creative writing, storytelling. I've always been interested in music and painting and like all these things that are very expressive. And not saying that being a doctor or being, a lawyer or whoever it is not expressive. It's just that I want to go into art. And my parents, they weren't necessarily very, very happy or agreeing of that. And so we always clashed heads in terms of that. And whenever we did, it was always about like the ideals of like my future, right? And so I feel that, and I spoke about this with Chua the other day, and we got into conversation about like how the different generations were raised and how I was um, put into like many others like me as well, put into a position where like we felt like we had to abide by, the expectations of our parents, and so we feel unhappy, my generation or me, like for personally, like I felt unhappy with whatever my parents wanted me to do, or I felt like the limitations of how much I can give. And so in my defense, um I didn't really bother going in or even, trying to get into like nursing or like, I mean, I did my research. I spoke with like many nursing students, lawyers, and I felt like it just wasn't for me. And I think that that caused um, a greater space between me and my family members, or parents, right? And so, and it didn't feel good, if it didn't feel very good. It felt horrible because I felt like unloved. I felt like, and I laugh, I scoffed at that because like I think it's silly now because all they ever want to show is that they love you, they care about you. And I know that now, right? But it was just so difficult to see that growing up, right? Um, because we were always clashing heads and we were always disagreeing about something. But here is what I've learned and what I've done to deal with that. And it wasn't until like my third year in college where I came to the conclusion that like my parents, they lived through me, and they never had any dreams, they never had any goals. And I kept thinking about who I was, what my dreams are, what my goals are, and it got me thinking about like, okay, well, what about my parents, right? Who are they outside of their roles as my parents? And so when I started to ask myself that and started to become very curious, I decided to reach out to my parents and have a conversation with them. And it wasn't like, hour-long conversations of me giving them interview questions. It was just regular day-to-day talk. And in fact, if you make an effort, you shall receive, And once I started to get into 5 minute to 10 minute to 15 minute, 20 minute conversations with my parents about where they come from, how did they grow up, what were they like, what were their parents like, my grandparents, right? Like, who are my grandparents outside of my grandparents, and how were they like to my parents? And I think that there's that repeating cycle of like, we see our grandparents and they're very sweet to us, but then as parents, they were, probably seen differently in the way that my parents described, right? Like they were parents, they were parents. And it's the same here, right? Like our grandchildren, right, or their grandchildren, they treat them like angels, but to us, we thought that they were like, the object of all of our, the objection of all of our dreams. But anyways, back to what I was talking about with, figuring out the identities and trying to understand who my parents were as people, like that really helped me build a connection with them. And I think that I've come to realize through my, my prying and my questions and my curiosity that my parents were actually going through a lot more, right? Like they couldn't allow to have dreams. They couldn't be allowed to chase their careers. They weren't allowed to, like all they ever known was just war, survival, and I think that for me, like I've always known that. Like I felt like it's always been in the back of my head, but I never really like comprehended that like my parents, like yes, my parents did that. Like it's like the stories that you hear, but then like you kind of feel like, oh, it's not personal. But in this case, it was very personal. And like that's when I felt like, okay, let me realize how real this is. Like, right, my parents are real people, right? They're not just parents, right? But because they play their role so well, it's difficult to see them outside of their role. And that's when like the mental struggle of being the most difficult child to being troubled about how can I help my parents. And then like I struggle a lot with like, oh my God, like I don't have anything as a person, right? Like I even have second thoughts sometimes about like, damn, I really should have went to med school and maybe I should have helped my parents a lot better. But it is what it is. And it brings up, self insecurities. It brings up um like this whole, and I don't want to say like burden, but it's like this weight of responsibility that is just very difficult to carry. It's hard to carry because when you actually rationalize that this is their history, this is who they are, and our generation or my generation, right, and very few millennials, right, like they have taken it upon themselves to break that generational curse and become who they want to be, and be successful and be able to help their parents and their grandparents to be healthy and wealthy and whoever they want to be. But I think right now my biggest struggle is just accepting who I am and how I can help as myself, and showing my parents that as an artist, it's not it's going to be very difficult as an artist. I understand that, but I want to be able to hopefully become successful one day to show them that it's possible. And I think that right now, and all of times, is one of the most groundbreaking and most best times for the Hmong people, right? Like Sunisa Lee, news anchor Chinu Her, Jia Vang, Dua Mua, actor, like there are so many people in the Hmong community right now who are actually trying to make it big as artists, as actresses, and even singers, and I think that my parents are struggling about that with me too, but they are very supportive in education. And I think that that is a level ground that me and my parents are, able to connect on. But yeah, like most of these struggles, like they keep me from getting out of bed. They keep me from, you know, like stealing my own joy as an artist, right? Like, because it's like, wow, like I have this whole bloodline on my back. And also like how can I become better, and how can my parents also like how can I make them understand, because they are just such visual people. They need to be able to see it, and you need to prove it to them in order for them to understand, to truly understand. And I guess another thing that I wanted to bring up is like, I feel like with generational, the differences in generational curses and you know, like this continuous battle, like it creates a break or like it creates a separation in the Hmong community in which, you know, like in almost a lot of the conversations that I've had with people my age, like they'll talk about their parents and then like everybody else in the conversation will be like, yeah, we get it. You know what I mean? But then really I feel like there is a level of self-work that needs to be done before really being able to talk about like other people, like our parents, our grandparents, and that self work. You really need to put in effort to be able to not only become who you want to become, but also become the daughter that you've always wanted to become, right? Like I've always wanted my family to be closer. And once I started to act the part, right? Once I started to reach out more, once I started to be more gentler, or once I started to, you know, see them as like, yeah, these are people who I love, you know, and act accordingly, then I think that is when we became closer, you know. Um, and and for anybody who is like dealing with this same situation, I really hope that you don't give up on yourself and that you don't give up on the people who love you and the people that you love, right? And find different approaches on how to become who you want to become, and find different and reach out for help. You know what I mean? Like for me, like the way how I dealt with things was I journaled for years. I journaled for so many years, and I felt like it's helped me a lot to be able to just lay out my ideas, lay out my anger, all my emotions, right? And just be able to process in that way. And sometimes processing things can be very, very difficult because it's just you and your paper and pen, right? And you may have a different way of processing, right? And so, you know, you got to find that healthy outlet. Keyword healthy, okay? Very healthy outlet. I don't want you getting pregnant somewhere. I don't want you, you know, having a child somewhere. Or I don't want you overdosing on drugs. I don't want you, you know, passing out because of, you know, alcoholism. But there is a certain level of, you know, maturity that you have to be able to capture for yourself, you know. So yeah, just find that healthy outlet. So bye now.
nhớ cho lên số tư Columbia nó chạy hùa plo khang của nhớ hùa Minnesota của cô ya ý lên nà ya của chúng mua ít tu của giờ ta chỉ của cô mới luôn nên ổn định là ha ta chỉ nó chạy của cô họ lựa về North Memorial Hospital của chú họ lựa về nó chạy cô sai hiệu cho tí nên cứ tua về Hmong này ya cứ là chúng mua insurance chị cũng muốn chỉ là muốn bán ha muốn hạt sẽ lợi cho nhát cha nó nhát tao trong lại cha là cũng một tên nổ là tên nổ nó này à ai không có kịp bán kịp thọ cái thứ nó là cũng bán là thọ chị thầu ổn định yang yang ổn định cứ thầu cũng chỉ tao mò nó này à chị cũng sang hạt house rồi giờ chị nhát cái nhát rong này chị nhát cái nhát rong cho lại cắt lại tờ ha giờ buổi tôi nên cứ nhớ luôn thường xuyên này chị sang hạt thế cho bọn nhát cái nhát rong là nó này à là thế chị tất cả cũng mò nó chị cũng mất sản luôn nó chị cái anh nhớ kháng ha nó rong nó chị cứ giờ chẳng khăn đó này giờ nhớ cho YouTube cái sáng ha YouTube cái cứ giờ dùng luôn YouTube King này giờ ai dùng cho sát cho YouTube King lo rồi giờ dùng khôi YouTube Ning lo là bộ mỗi dạng cái sát rồi này giờ so cũng chú cái sáng nó chị nó cũng không mình chỉ luôn là ta chỉ nó chị cuộc học cái sáng to mental health like you to get so shot you learning. In short, that's what I wanted to say about gay mental health cho bây giờ mong lo là bây giờ cứ chỉ tao tao hay ta mental health cho toàn chi nó nè
chị nó chị của tôi bà chú của lúc ninh thầu của chị mua này à chị bé trả lâu lại của nào của chị cả hà dù mà ôn này chị dù lúc bộ ta chị dù khi nó tham một chỗ chua chị tôi dù lúc chị dù chỉ là trộn là này à bây giờ giờ mà hà ô chị chỉnh lúc hà nó chị của chị hà ta dù trộn lo dù lúc bộ là nè tới nhà lên mental health lo depression lo cái nhớ sa cái su sa tới họ nó nói chị giờ dù mà tới cái nhớ sa su sa lúc sáng đến đó nó chị ô dù trong lại dù lúc nó khai chỉ cho mình rồi nè nó chị họ nó chị cũng chỉ tao đến đó xong mà hà lúc đó cũng sư của họ depression cả nó chị của tôi lấy thầu ốp hàng cọp lỗ chỉ họ giờ lại ốp hàng cọp lỗ luôn lại là chị chế nó chị của tôi tham mộ qua lứa lo ha của tôi tham mộ qua tôi kể nó sáng nè diagnose là đặc biệt son chỗ của tôi món nó bố cô hạt ta của nhớ rồi remission so cô giờ khó cứ ở đây dùng sáng hay việc khó ta thôi như nhà mình chỉ là nó chỉ là cô hạt rồi hạt ta cho tin cứ mua kể nó sáng chú cái này cũ là nó chỉ trong này là chúng nó còn nuôi trong là nó nói ha chỉ thằng là hạt ta thế ra của nó cho tăng của ý xin nên nó chỉ dùng từ từ sáng cho từ khi hạt ta ở chạy dùng nãy dùng gì từ trong từ dùng hàng này dùng từ trong tê trong tờ ở chạy nó bây giờ hạt ta dùng nó cho bán cái dùng lúc sáng sáng mua cho cặp cái phe nó nè là chỉ còn nó chỉ cũng ở trong của từ từ sáng rồi của từ khi ta chỉ cuối mà sáng cơ ha hôm đó chẳng đâu nhà họ của luôn nên mà chắc chắn chẳng từ mà chắc chắn của từ khi trong mà chắc chắn giờ sáng rồi của luôn nên ta sẽ có cái lu chăm là cái ở đó của chắc chắn thì sáng từ của luôn nên giờ thầu giờ hà nó chỉ tới giờ mua cái từ sáng đến đâu ta chỉ mua bà mình thầu của dù thầu dù mua cái nhớ sáng đến đâu là này hiện thầu là này chỉ dùng là dù chỉ bao dù cái từ là này dù mua chú cái từ là dùng là dù chỉ mua cái bán là chỉ mua cái từ cái tao dù chỉ dùng là dù cũng chỉ sáng to cả là ha ta chỉ dù sáng cái dù chú cái nhớ sáng blue màu nữa nè là chỉ thì dù chú cái sáng lên nó chỉ cho cứ lú dù là yên lú họ cho cứ chớ cái dù mua cho dù chú sáng thì họ này đó là dù mua ha nè chỉ thầu họ nó chỉ từ cứ lú chăm pleu cứ lú nên nó nuôi chờ có cô mua tô của tôi kinh lo ha nó nuôi hàng có cô chắc có mua cho của chú sáng nó chỉ cô hà mấy chỉ chính tân thọ của cô cho của chú sáng bé ra lại tân thọ bé ra họ này chị chắc có mua cho cô nào của chị vì cho họ dùng mua chú không mỏ này mua chú không mỏ chịถ้าหมอยิ่งใจอยู่จากน้ำมันเราตัวนี้คือเชื่อก็อยู่ใจอยู่ที่ชาฮานะจะพูดอีสานก็อยู่มันช่วยเขาเชื่อคืออยู่ย่อตัว safe แล้วย่อตัวก็ชาเราอยู่จะชาฮะแต่ตัวนี้เราไม่จูนะเจเนี่ยย่อจงเลยนะถ้าเมื่อเขา support เรายังไม่จะนึงเชื่อนึงตัวนึงจูเกี่ยย่อชานะจะตอนเขาไปชาเขากูไม่จูกันนะกูจี但是个那个字被怎么就他们明明了，但是没包能到了，被怎么就有一度空才是给有哪有字就三个有，不然有路内哈就三个不帮怎么哈那样，就那字哈个有山的这个梦路有多个月了哈，这个梦我住了山的是嘛。mình bơi cái chú sang đấy sự chị còn nó thổi của mông chắc thi bé này mông thi bé nó chị của bảo tàu ta at the end of the day dù dù nãy dù gì lối một chàng là dù thầu cơ này dù cho tôi dù chắc bán dù tôi khen chị của thầu chị của chị chú bán của tôi khen ta sẽ thầu chị của chú bán chị của chị sinh tu là này chị bé của phụ chị thầu yêu sinh tu chị yêu muốn bảo tờ you have a lot of emotions ha yêu thầu từ tới giờ mình sẽ lo yêu từ từ sáng họ tới giờ cứ tôi chỉ lu ha tôi chỉ nhỏ là rồi yêu muốn bảo tờ nè chị còn nó luôn gì cho của tôi mò depression ha nó chị rồi lại ở đâu của khu của tôi khi nhỏ hiện này chị tôi tao ý chồng tao rồi nó chị của tôi lúc của tôi giờ của tôi mua ít chồng tao rồi nó chị của mà đặc ăn tiền lúc của tôi khen thằng nó chị của tôi mua vàng mua chế là tôi giờ tao chế mua chim mua xô là mà tới khi mà đặc ăn bảo hạt ta tôi khen là yêu tao bảo cha này
you just to shout you to king too so self-confident I had to find my self-confidence ha be proud of who I am ai ku mataka luku ku tu king ha ku lu ha ku ka depression and that's why ku lu ning pla ka tao ý chồng tao nó sẽ kể ku có more depression hụt lo cả là I'm in remission so mà halu có turning point có cứปูหาตะเต้าหาตากูตอปังกูตุเข่งยาทอกูนะกูจีพิงจักนะหากูจักมึงโรโปเจมองโนกูยาเจกูโอโรยูยูโยชานะยาฮะจิตังหาทอกูมกูตุตุนเจกะยูสังกะหาตายูตุมิโยโนเอยาจิโมยูละนะในเรื่องตัวลูยูตุมิโยนะยูตุนจันชัยเจอหาตาใจยูตุมิโยรู้นี่จีเจ้าโจโลโลยูตุสังกะนือตอกเป็นอย่างจงชัมเปอร์สินะยากูจริงมกูจูชาจูละฮะหน่อยยังนึกป้องจอจะกูรู้นะเจยิ่งรู้ฮะมายังนึกป้องจะกูจีรู้อยู่ฮะจริงจูกูดูฮะนะเจใช่ปะจีรู้กูตัวมิโยนนะนะเจกูมอแต่น้องรู้สาเจกูตะกันกูตัวเข่งเจเลยน้อยกว่าฮะย่อเลยน้อยฮะย่อก็ช้ารู้เลยว่าลูกกูย่อก็ช้ารู้เลยฮะโซช้าลูกกูรู้นี่เลยหันเตาchị thầu của chị mua cái nhớ sáng đến đó chẳng đâu nhà này ạ chị của yên khu khá của nàng ha của chị ta chỉ yêu mua ít tu nhà ha ít tu xài là chị yêu của chị trong khá ta ha này ạ vì đó khó trong này yêu khá ta này chị mà gọi là yêu thổ yêu đặc án thổ yêu lúc cái ha nè rồi chị của khá nè khá gì là khá mình chỉ sư cho khá tân thọ ta chỉ tu của khá chút chẳng số nhà ha của kháอย่างchỉ giải sa là chị của tu therapist là chị thầu của mong ô nhá tao ít không tao sẽ chị của tu mong tí tao ít tu therapist vì cho khá ta thầu nó chị thầu ấy tham mong của tao của tu more depression chị bố hạ của tí tao nuôi tu therapist này à ta chỉ thọ chị you pin sa ta ở chạy you ăn được bút thà này à bút tu chỉ là tu cứ bảo you lo ya bố ya bị cắt lỡ ha này à tại sao bố ya chỉ ta tao you nữa nè ta chỉ họ chỉ diễn cha nó chị họ cũng hiểu ha khờ tao hiểu muốn chỉ của chị therapist này ya ta you muốn được bút thà nó chị you khá tan thọ you lúc sángอย่างคือbố ya chỉ son rồi lo giờ ông cái sai lo giờ cho you lúc cái một thổ rồi lên từ nó nè nó chỉ you bắt ta chỉ trong này you cú cái啥là hoàn đầu ha chỉ ta là họ you chỉ sai mỗi bị từ này ya ít tu ở chỉ là này ya you cú sáng trợ tu họ ta chỉ you cú chân chạy trợ tu họ vì cho họ ta chân chạy trả mỗi lần lên là tu nó chỉ là nó họ ta ô chạy ploy yo mu ha le no chu tu họ nó này ya chỉ you cú chỉ sáng ha le ha ta chỉ you muốn chỉ you ít tu therapist you khá số chẳng số nhà you cái nhớ sa cái tu sa là chỉ trong này nếu chúng mới chờ một khá cho bà cho lên từ là chỉ trong này you cho sa hạt ta của khá cho có ta là có giờ chỉ một số của lúc cái lô là giờ hạt ta của ấy tu nên phe nó này à là chỉ của giờ khó cái cứ đặc á là hạt therapeutic phán cho you về cho hạt ta giờ you pay more you chỉ sự này à you chỉ tao cái trong bán là chỉ trong này chỉ khó ít ra cậu ít ra gì nó chỉ trong này nhện nhã thì cho you là này à giờ có thể mình xí là you muốn xí trong chỉ nhện nhã là chỉ là nói quá mình chỉ của tu therapist mà halu tu chơi của trang plan là chỉ của tu therapist ý you nói you gì ha mà đó là you khá nó đó cho you nói you chỉ là cũng do you mất sa ha nè right you là do you mất sa là chỉ you ok mất cái gì trong cái ha nè chỉ của chỉ sáng khá trong cái ta khá nó khá mình chỉ sư khá cả sáng cả mình chỉ sư ta chỉ của tu therapist thì của khá số chẳng sốอย่างcho ha chỉ ta là họ cũng một của tu sai cho họ cứ he is mỗi lần là hai sai đồ YouTube chở sinh này ạ he is my savior vì cho họ ta ya chỉ muốn nó chỉ sao của bố trình nhỏ nó hay là cho môn nữ ôi tu cái sáng này chỉ sao của lúc nên bồi dưỡng lên nó ha nè vì môn nữ ôi tu cứ very innocent rồi ấy tu cứ ôi là chỉ bảo ta tu cho câu này ạ là chỉ trong này you tao ha khá là you tu kinh ha ta you chỉ tao mà sai you lúc nên cái you tao ít tu có trong cho you tu tem tu mình nhỏ ha nè này cái bố lúc là bố tao ít tu có trong cho bố tem tu mình nhỏ ha nè ในเจกูโมกูตุตุใช้อย่างmotivation ลองเราอย่างอีกอย่างคือเธอกูรู้จูฮะเธอกูรู้ช้ากับกูรู้ช้าเนาะก็ตู้ฮะกูรู้กูตั้งใจเราโอมูเธอจะจะกูตุตุรู้นิ่งซะนะเจกูโมสั่งลูอีกข้อคือเตจะไปจะหุ่มมองหนอนนะยาเตจะไปจีสามุงติเต้าจะทำเทอราปิสต์เราจะทานซู mental health นะวิจารณ์ตากูนะเจกูย้ายตู้ใช้ลูกตัวเน้นเตเลยนะยาเท่าที่มองลูเขามองไอ้พวกหัตตาหนึ่งลูกปูเลยนะยาหาลูกปูนะเจตัวเราอยู่จำมั่วเลยนะยาวิจารณ์ตาอยู่กูเจียลูกปูฮะนะหาจิตตาหอยเต้นน่ะน้องนะเจอยู่ทานซูนะเจจงเลยโอเคจำมั่วจะอยู่ซื้อแต่สิกูสหตาตัวอย่าจำมั่วเราอยู่นะเจอยู่จากการอยู่ตุกิงซื้อตัวจากการรู้อยู่นะเจจากการอยู่ตุกิงซื้อแต่อย่างคือก็ไม่รู้ฮะตาก็จำมั่วแล้วนะอย่าจุดตกคู่họ tụ cười nhớ sáng đầu hạt ta có yêu chú kể trong mà na tới ra cho họ chưa cho lúa yêu ta cho lúa yêu ta nó chỉ nhận được yêu chơi ra yêu mua đồ dạng cứ yêu bán đồ yêu đặt ăn rong này ya chưa dạng cứ yêu ô đồ yêu đặt ăn nhớ sáng lo rồi yêu ô đồ yêu đặt ăn sáng tận tàu tú nè này chị ô lại cô hà họ cứ bé ít tham mong tao bé chỉ mong nó là tới ra tìm mình chỉ cho tới nên cứ yêu mất sai luôn nhớ rèn đồ yêu này yaอย่าปวดจิตจะเฉยอยู่ปวดจิตเปล่าปังอยู่ในเกอยู่จุดเจอมันก็เลยปวดซื้อเฮ้ยก็มึงเป่าโดยเจ้าคือปวดเป่าซื้อที่หอมหมอหนูนั้นไอ้ปวดตาก็เจอเนื้อชาเจอโอเลยหอยจะจำหมดตั้งแล้วชอบตัวชาดูยูทูบคิงจุ่มเกจ่าชาจริงยังมั่วชี้เหรอของยูทูบคิงคุยยูทูบคิงนะในเกอยู่มั่วขนมใช้มึงในเกตรงเลยบ้านเตาตัวอยู่แต่การใช้อยู่รู้นิ่งมึงตัวอย่างก็นึกก็การชาสนายไอ้ชาเนาะเราเกจะจงดูลงละ depression但是可能有个做给上色啊，估计不少，但从来做都不要上来过，但是เขาคือ到估计上admit เราเรา要练下ta cũng một tuần mò nóเรายัง要做给怎么嘛，比如เขาta有情况咯哈，我讲有的时một tuần mò nó ha，只当然好了有都จะจะช้าอยู่รุ่นนิ่งนะย่ะ我讲นู่นกูให้một cái nhauช้าเขาตื่นจิตตัวจะช้าเขาตื่นนะย่ะ我讲กูให้รงเลยnó chỉแต่เขาเราอยู่怎么但是有没有做给怎么好就切比如เขาta the only one judging you เรา要ตัวกู要上cái cái rong cái chỉ rong chỉ yêu nữa nè thì tất cả yêu tụ kinh lo thế này à chỉ là lưng lưng tụ giờ bớt sáng lấy chẳng là tụ chim bảo là yêu sáng cho yêu tụ kinh nè so you always have to more you your value and see yourself first and whatever แต่อย่างคือก็โตคู่này à thì moreคู่กับตั้งแต่อย่างคือให้คู่กับตั้งเราตัวเชื่อหัตถ์คู่有时是很一样嘞，只要侬拿着笔记那样，有时是很得，还有就到上得就有读听，有么啥有到上得得就从零做到那样，那我讲有读听有上得知道着了呢，那这这样侬那这个么是啥？แต่จะยังติดอย่างเลยเนาะไปหาจีมูติดต่อ mental health แล้วอยากถามถึง mental health ฮะอย่างอยู่ไปจับผู้หญิงนะอยากไปรู้เนาะโอเคนี่อยากแต่ไปอยากแต่โอ้เนาะจังก็ขาด depression เนาะจังเลยจ้ะนะ no one talks about it right แต่สิโอเลยกูหาอยู่ทุกผู้หญิงจังฮะจะคือตัวอยู่ผู้หญิงเจอโอเลยหามีซื้อหล่อตัวนนเต่าแล้วนะ read between the lines อยากกูตัวพูดอยู่ย่อๆนี่จีฟูกูนู่นนึงหูสุกุฮาตาปลอนู่นมันน่ะหมอแล้วเจอยู่ตัวมอกภาษาตาโอ้แต่ฉันเนี่ยใจตากูจูเก็บปังแล้วอย่าแต่ฉันเนี่ยหวังกูจูเก็บปังเลยจ้างแล้วนะนึกหาหูกูนะแล้วเจแล้วหา you read between the lines จะตัวนี้คืออยู่ย้อนดูโอ้พงยืนดูนะเจจะหอนะเจกูอยากจะคือปั้นต่อ YouTube ปั้นต่อ YouTube นะ soขนมนั่นเจกุสันไตอีกเขาคือจริงๆจะบิจุเขาอีชาเขาจิมุงกูทำเอาอีชานั่นเจเขาเป้าซื้ออย่างไรกูนะเนี่ยเจอีอย่างเขาเคยเงาเนาะนั่นเจกูจะทำซื้อหัตตาอยากทอกันจีจุเกจงดูโลเราจุเกยอชาเลยเนาะแล้วนะอยู่เลยจ้าฮะปั้นต่ออยู่ตุกี้นะเนี่ยโมกูบิจุอยู่จิมอลินตัวเลยนะเนี่ยอยู่ไหนอยู่จิตตาแกจะชาจะอยู่เตพงเตอยู่หรอจนใช้ดูอยู่ทางเลยวิโรคอนดูอยู่อพงอยู่หรอจงเลยจริงๆเต็มเองนะ那些一考古往差多那些有 the crisis line 古因hu crisis line 当就 crisis line 那些有一度是当个个 hu 做那样不么一叫跟ดูอยู่ทาง thằng có yêu cho chỉ ta xí lo là do là hai ít tâm mò này giờ trong là yêu chi một số họ cái bán yêu là nè nó chỉ có vui cho bố chỉ bố mà bán bố đồ yêu thằng chỉ bố bán yêu hát chỉ ta là họ giờ chỉ tới nhà emergency là nó chỉ bố in khu tàu like ambulance rồi là giờ tí tàu chỉ thăm mồ hát chỉ hầm mồ chỉ bố lý nhát ý chính ra nó nè tôi bán yêu hát chỉ ta là họ go ở đây là hạt chú xong này chỉ một cô tham mộ của sáng ta thầu yêu lâu ha yêu nãy yêu chỉ cho yêu mong này chỉ trong này tết họ nói chỉ yêu chỉ mất sáng mong này à ta chỉ yêu chú xong yêu trả một cô tham mộ bởi cô yêu trong nuôi yêu hạt ta yêu cũng một cái nhỏ sa yêu họ nhỏ yêu lúc này nó yêu một chỗ sa lại cha từ nhà này nó chỉ trong này có trả một lúc tí sáng nó yêu từ khi hạt ta của lúc này nó ai qua chỗ sa lại cha nó này à chỉ mới khó rồi yêu mới chú cái sáng cho yêu mà nó yêu ha tao ha ta yêu tốn càng cái bán có thứ nữa là thì tao yêu cho tham mộ là yêu mua cái resource tao đâu chẳng đâu nhá chỉ tao là họ thầu công của một tao ấy tu therapist là hắn này giờ có chỉ cái nhớ sáng lo là giờ mong court lo là giờ có sáng chú ý bán bơ cứ thản sự có cho cái nhớ sáng lên nữa sau này giờ có chỉ sáng nhớ đủ có chụp hơi như này what they call it group therapy có tu therapist là những mua resources lo là mua lựa học cái lựa bán có lo là tháo nó cho có mong join lo có mua cái sa ha chị lựa cái nó chị cũng cho sáng thà ta giờ mua cái nhỏ sa nó chị thì tao yêu cho tham mộng ha yêu chỉ bảo tham mộng nó là there's a county line giờ có who county nó chỉ bố in khá ta cho clinic giờ cho tư lo giờ có chỉ mua insurance lo who county ha county mà cho có mong tí tao health insurance free clinic free assessment free evaluation thế hả